Hello Math 7 students, this is Utah Middle School Math Project 5.3a. How many diameters does it take to wrap around a circle? This is part 2. Hopefully this will be the last. We might extend into a third day. To get started, I want to review students' homework was memorize the formulas that we came up last time, so we're going to start there. What is the formula for circumference? If I give you the diameter, how do I use that diameter to find the circumference? And what you should have come up with is what we wrote down last time. The diameter multiplied by pi is equal to the circumference. What if, instead of giving you the diameter, I give you the radius? Last time we discussed that the radius doubled is how we get the diameter. A radius is half of the diameter, so if I give you a radius, multiply it by 2, then I know the diameter. And just like before, if I know the diameter, we just multiply it by pi, and that's how we get the circumference. So in problem number 3, we're going backwards now. In problem number 3, if you know the diameter is 5 inches, what is the approximate measure of the circumference? That means I'm taking the diameter, which is 5, and since I gave you the diameter, I simply multiply the diameter by pi, and it will give us the circumference. Now, you may not have a calculator that has a pi button. When you are in school and have access to these calculators, then you need to make sure that you are using the actual pi button. So 5, you'll find the pi button here next to the letter H. If you press that button and then select pi, now you can press enter and it will do that calculation. As we saw in our last lesson, an approximation that is acceptable if you do not have your own calculator with a pi button would be 3.14. So alternatively, we also could type in 5 multiplied by 3.14, and you're going to see it's accurate to a couple of decimal places, but it is an approximation. So 5 multiplied by pi is equal to the circumference was 15.70 inches. What I need you to do now, what students are already working on in class, is find the circumference of each one of these. Make sure you're paying attention to the information that's given. The first one they're giving the radius, the next one the diameter, and the final one the radius. So make sure you're using that information correctly. Pause the recording until you have those done. The first one says the radius is equal to 0.5. What do I do to find the circumference? Zuri? Yes. When I do 0.5 times 2, that gives me the diameter. And I know that when I have the diameter, all I have to do with that diameter is multiply it by pi. And when I multiply it by pi, that gives me the circumference. You can do this in one single step in your calculator. You do not need to take multiple calculation steps. You can just go 0.5 multiplied by 2, then in one calculation also multiplied by pi. You guys get the same thing? Pi, exactly, you got pi. Later on, you are going to have problems that will say, make it exact, and I'll show you what that looks like, but recognizing first that that calculation there that it gave us was pi is a step in that right direction. So the directions say to the nearest tenth. So 3.1 is all that we really need to do to the nearest tenth. Don't forget your units. This would be 3.1 centimeters. Again, understand why it's centimeters. What we're really doing is if we had a piece of string that we could wrap very carefully around the whole entire perimeter of a circle, or the circumference, that string would end up being 3.1 centimeters long. So that's why it's the same type of unit as what the radius is. For the next one, what do I do? Diameter is 2.5 centimeters. How do I use that to find the circumference? Thank you, Tanner. Yeah, we just multiply the diameter by pi. So when I know the diameter that goes from edge through the center to the other edge, all I have to do with that diameter is multiply it by pi. 2.5 times pi. How many of you guys were using pi in your calculator? A little bit easier than using 3.14, and it's just more accurate. So 2.5 times pi. 7.85. Be careful though, since it asks to round to the nearest tenth. What should I be writing down? Good. So 7.8539. Rounding to the nearest tenth would be 7.9 centimeters. Okay, and this time I give you the radius. With the radius being 3 units, what is that circumference? Cambria. Say that again. How did you get that? You're probably right. Tell me what you did. Yes, 3 doubled so that I can turn that length into a diameter, and then once that length is a diameter, then I multiply it by pi. And go ahead and just give me your answer. Give me a couple digits. Did you write down a couple of digits by chance? No? Okay. Then let me do it in my calculator. 3 times 2 times pi. Writing down a couple of digits, we have 18.8495559. All I need to do is round to the nearest tenth. Even though this 4 could be rounded by the 9, we don't need to worry about that. We're rounding to the nearest tenth, so all I have to do is look at that, and that 4 isn't going to change anything. So the circumference is equal to 18.8. The unit is units. Now, I feel like that's some pretty good practice on how we can find the circumference. Now, we have objects. So you are going to see circles in your real life in lots of different places. Here we have masking tape. I'm giving you the diameter of masking tape, I'm giving you the radius of a clock face, the diameter of a ring, etc. Based on the pieces of information that I give you, which are no longer marked this time, so we can't use the diagram to give us some hints. They're no longer marked. I still want you to find the circumference of each. Yes, Luke? What do you mean is... I'm sure there exists a ring with a 2.5 centimeter diameter. I'm sure there exists a steering wheel that's 9 inches. I couldn't tell you where that steering wheel is or where the Ferris wheel is that's 50 feet, but I'm sure that they exist somewhere. Yep. Okay, with your groups, you need to find the circumference of each one of these objects. With your groups, ready, set, go. Pause the recording again until you get these done. I'm going to continue on in the recording, just showing my work so that you can check your answers. If the diameter of masking tape is 5 inches, I'm going to take that 5 and multiply it by pi. When I do that, I get 15.7079. Now rounding to the nearest tenth means I can just write 15.7 inches. The next one, I'm only giving you the radius. The radius of a clock face is 11 inches. That would be probably something kind of like that minute hand that's going to go to the edge. And when I have a radius, the first thing I do is I double it. That gives me the diameter, and then once I know that, then I can multiply it by pi. So 11 times 22. Excuse me, 11 times 2 is 22. I got excited about the answer. And then we multiply that by pi, and we get 69.115. But again, round to the nearest tenth, we end up with 69.1. Units is inches, so I keep that units. We'll continue on with the class, letting them share their work. Diameter of a ring is 2.5 centimeters. So, what do I do with that 2.5? Trace. Multiply it by pi. 2.5 times pi. I get 7.85398. We'll just stop at 3 there because I'm out of space. I don't want to cover up the next data. And when I round that, Trace, what did you get when you rounded? Great job. 7.9 centimeters rounded to the nearest tenth. Diameter of a Ferris wheel is 50 feet. If the diameter is 50 feet, what do I do with that number 50? Dylan, multiply it by pi, and when I get 50 multiplied by pi, I type that into my calculator, and that gives me 157.0796. And what do I round that to, Dylan? No, rounded to the nearest tenth would be 157.1. I need a tenths place decimal, so I look next to it in the hundredths place and I see the 7. The 7 is big enough that it would make that round up to a 1. So 157.1 feet. That would mean, keep that in mind because this is going to come up again in a future lesson, that would mean how far is somebody sitting in one of these seats? How far are they traveling? 157.1 because they're going around, and that is a perfect circle going perfectly around. That is the exact path that you're going to take when you're on that Ferris wheel. 157.1 feet is how much you would travel going on that ride. A radius of a steering wheel is 9 feet. What do I do with that radius? Carter? Yep, multiply by 2, multiply by pi. And again, you can do this all in one single step in your calculator. 9 times 2 times pi gives me 56.5486. And there's more, but I'm out of space. So what did you round that to, Carter? Yes, 56.5 inches. Folks, you are going to realize in this unit, not only is it a matter of do you understand circles and the relationships and can you use your calculator, it's also going to be a little bit of can you round. So make sure you are practicing your rounding as well and asking questions if you are having trouble with that, because on the test, I am going to expect you to round and I am going to expect it done correctly, otherwise you will miss those points. So keep that in mind and make sure you're practicing it throughout the whole entire unit. Okay, what about now? These problems say the circumference of 5 objects is given. Again, the circumference of these objects is given. You need to calculate the diameter. How are you going to do that? If I'm giving you the circumference, how are you going to find the diameter? Davin. Divide it by pi. Again, it all comes back to that relationship between all of these things. And I hope after that practice, you can see that when I know the diameter, we multiply it by pi. Diameter multiplied by pi is equal to the circumference. So if I know the circumference but I don't know the diameter, you can work backwards by eyes on the screen, because this might be something that looks a little bit weird to you. Pi is a symbol, but it is a number. This is a variable, meaning we don't know what it is. So if I have a variable multiplied by a number, how do I undo multiplying by a number? We divide by that same number. Even though it might look weird, it is just a number. And whatever I do to one side, I do to the other side. What's pi divided by pi? The same thing as 5 divided by 5 or a million divided by a million, right? Any number divided by itself is 1. So that divides out. If I know the diameter, if I know the circumference and I want to find the diameter, I work backwards. I divide. So the circumference divided by pi. Now, I don't care which way you do this. I do think a really good strategy would be to treat it like an equation. So if I give you the circumference, I would say d, whatever that diameter is, multiplied by pi is equal to the circumference, but hey, I know the circumference. 76.9 is that circumference, and this is equal to d times pi. Once you set up the equation like this, it's really, really clear what we should be doing. And I know ultimately, yes, we're just going to divide by pi, but it's all about that math practice 3. It's showing our work and understanding why we're going to be dividing by pi. So I want to see this on your paper. Now we can divide by pi. And yes, ultimately I know what I'm typing into my calculator, but this shows me why I'm typing 76.9 divided by pi into the calculator. When I do this, you guys are going to be faster at this than me, I think. 76.9 divided by pi. I got 24.478. You guys the same? Okay, 24.478. We need to round to the nearest tenth. So rounding to the nearest tenth, I see the 4. I need the tenths place, but I look in the hundredths to see what I do. That 7 is going to make this round up. So the diameter is equal to 24.5 inches. Put that to practice with the next ones. Make sure you understand what we're doing. Each one of these, the circumference is given, and we are being asked to find the diameter. I'm going to pause the recording as students work ahead on the next set of problems. Ready, set, go. Setting the problem up in the same way as last time, I know that the diameter multiplied by pi will equal the circumference. So when it gives me the circumference is 78.1. So now I can set up or solve this equation that's been set up. The diameter multiplied by pi is 78.1. How do I undo multiplying by pi? We simply divide by pi. Whatever I do to one side, I do it to the other side, and I end up with d is equal to, give me just a second to catch up and type it into my own calculator. I have 24.86 and then a couple of zeros, which means I'm going to round this one to 24.9 inches. And now it's your turn. The circumference of this lid is 11 inches. What is the diameter? Who can set that up for me, please? Thank you, Joshua. Okay, can you go back to this one? 11. Okay. Great. Thank you for setting that up. Instead of just saying I did 11 divided by pi, you explained why. You set up that equation. So thank you for that. We have the diameter is equal to, you said 11 divided by pi. Tell me one more time what you got. About 3.5. And the units would be inches. Good. 11 divided by pi. The rounding was done accurately, 3.501. That 0 is not going to make that 5 go up to a 6, so 3.5 inches. The next one, I'll set it up for you. I know that it's the diameter multiplied by pi is equal to the circumference that's given this time. So what do I do now? I've got it set up for you. What do I do? Luke, thank you. The one that's listed for you. Diameter times pi is equal to 50. How do I solve that? Mm-hmm. Great. The only thing that I would like to change in what you said is understand that the main goal here is not to divide the 50 by pi. The main goal is to get the diameter by itself. So that means I have to divide by pi in order to get the diameter by itself, to undo what's happening. As a result of keeping it balanced, that's when I also have to divide the 50 by pi. So I love all the things that you said. Just understand that this is why we're dividing by pi. This is a result. This is what we have to do to keep it balanced. The rounding should be d is equal to 15.9 inches. So again, watch that rounding. The next one, get it all the way set up for me. Circumference of a plate is 31 inches. What is the diameter? There are not enough hands. You had lots of time to work on this with your groups. Bella, what do I do? What do I do here? Divide both sides by pi. And what did you get when you did it 31 divided by pi? 3.8. Try again. Tell me what you got. Okay, and so when I round, what is 9.867? What does that round to? 9.9 inches. Great. Now, go one step further for me on each of these. What if I wanted to know the radius? What if I wanted to know the radius for, let's just focus on this one here with the car tire. What would the radius be? Cambria. Not 78.1 divided by 2. If that it could be a step, but we still wouldn't know the radius at that point. Zuri. Exactly. Since radius is doubled to get diameter, if I know diameter, how do I use that to get to a radius? We divide by 2. So you could go all the way backwards from the circumference, but since we already have the diameter, let's focus on here. However, eyes on the screen. Don't use the rounded answer. Go back to the one where it has a couple of digits, a couple of decimal places. If I take that diameter and divide it by 2, it gives me the radius. What is that going to be? 24.8600. Then divided by 2. That's going to give us 12.43. Notice the effect that the rounding can have on our answer. If we went with the rounded answer and divided it by 2, it's going to give us a different answer than if I go back to the original pre-rounding. You're going to have some homework problems like that where it does ask you to find the radius after we find the diameter, so just make sure you understand what that next step would be. Now, when a unicyclist pedals once, the wheel makes one full revolution. Unicycles don't have a chain to kind of propel them along, so if you're not pedaling on a unicycle, you're not going anywhere. Which means when this pedal goes around one whole time, that also means that this wheel has gone around one full time. The unicycle will move forward that same distance along the ground, and that makes sense, right? So kind of envision this. That is not a good job. Let me try that again. Here is that revolution. Notice that every spot on that tire is eventually going to touch the ground, right? So it's like unwrapping that and laying it along flat, and I have run out of space, but hopefully you can envision what that would look like. That unicycle, all of these spots on the tire are eventually going to hit the ground, so you can see how far it will have traveled. If Daniel is riding a unicycle with a diameter of 20 inches, how many times will he have to pedal to cover a distance of 50 feet? Now we're really getting into that problem solving now. Here, the diameter is 20 inches. The circumference, that's going to be important. How many times is he going to have to pedal? How many times is that wheel going to have to go around to get to a distance of 50 feet? Some students already got a head start and probably already know the answer. We're going to pause here though and have you all work on that. What are some strategies you're going to need to use? What are some issues? I'm going to tell you, hint, hint. Pay attention to the units. How are we going to be able to answer this question? Pause the recording, work with your groups. We'll come back together in just a few. Pause the recording now. Some strategies. Okay, what can we do to get started? What are some things that we have to be aware of? What would your first step even be? Even if you haven't finished the problem, what would we do? Zuri. Good. That's exactly, even though it's not necessary right now in the problem, taking care of and addressing the units is a really, really good step to take. This is given to us in inches, and the final question is asking what about 50 feet? That's going to be an issue. So understand first, probably should do something about that 50 feet. As Zuri says, when we multiply 50 feet by 12 to figure out how many inches, so 50 times 12 is equal to, what did you get, Zuri? Great. 50 times 12 is 600, so 50 feet is equal to 600 inches. That is going to be helpful later on. Now, how do I start answering this question? What do I do? Okay, Zuri, no one else wants to answer, so go ahead.
I started at the diameter. I knew it was 20, so I times it by pi, which got me my circumference.
Great. When we have the diameter, we multiply the diameter by pi, and it is going to give us the circumference. And what did you get when you multiplied 20 by pi? Give me a couple decimal places of accuracy. Let's go a few more decimal places if you have it. 8319? Great. We're not done with the problem, so I don't want to round too early. I want to keep at least a couple of extra decimal places right now, just like this. So the circumference is 62.8319. Let's understand what that means first. When a unicyclist pedals once, the wheel makes a full revolution, and the unicycle moves forward that same distance. So one pedal, and how far is that unicycle going to move? 62.8319 inches, Mrs. Proctor. Yes, that is correct. Thank you for being engaged, students. 62.8319 inches is how far that unicycle has traveled. Have we answered the question? No. Zuri, go ahead and finish it up.
Then I did the 60 inches divided by the circumference, which gave the answer.
Good. Only not 60 inches, but 600 inches, right? Yeah, the 600 inches, because it's asking how far to go 50 feet. That's how far to go 600 inches. 600 inches divided by that 62.8319, the amount that we go in one revolution, and that is equal to, what'd you get, Zuri?
I rounded it.
Okay.
9.6, but the real answer is 9.55.
Okay, 9.55414. And yes, we are definitely going to have to do some rounding. Let's go back to the question. How many times will he have to pedal? Is he really going to pedal just half of a time? So in this case, I would say it's probably okay to round all the way up to the nearest full pedal that he would take. Just because we wouldn't say exactly 9.5 pedals. We would probably say about 10 pedals. Yes, he's going to go a little bit over that 50, but I think rounding up to 10 is an okay thing to do for the answer in this problem. Zuri, great job, great strategy, really nicely done. Last one here. If the circumference of a circle is 8 pi, so again, I kind of mentioned that you're going to start seeing this. 8 pi is a precise number, and sometimes you're going to see problems where it says the circumference is 8 pi. I know you probably want it to be a number. You probably want to do that multiplication and get an approximation, and that's okay. But keeping it 8 pi keeps it really, really precise. Okay, so keep that in mind. That is approximately 25.1 inches. So which of the following is true? The ratio of the circumference to the diameter is 8. The radius of a circle is half the circumference. The diameter of a circle is twice the radius. The radius of a circle is 8 inches. The diameter of the circle is 8 inches. Go through those statements. Which ones are true? Not all of them are. Some of them are true. When you find a false one, rewrite it. Make some alterations to it so that it does become true. We're going to pause the recording as students work ahead on that a little bit. All of the false statements should be identified and then rewritten to be true. With your groups, ready, set, go. The ratio of the circumference to the diameter is 8. Is that true? Tells us the circumference is 8 pi. What's the diameter going to have to be in that case? Come on, guys. If I know the circumference, that's 8 pi, how do I find the diameter? Remember, that would be d times pi. What's the diameter then? If d times pi is equal to 8 times pi, undo by dividing by pi if it's necessary and you can't see it yet. What is the diameter going to have to be? 8. So is this a true statement that the circumference to the diameter, 8 pi to 8, is the ratio really 8? No, the ratio is pi. Yikes, guys. We have had lots of units on ratios. You should be able to recognize that it is not 8. 8 pi to 8 is not 8. 8 pi to 8 is pi. The radius of a circle is half of the circumference. True or false? False. The radius of a circle is half the diameter. The diameter of a circle is twice the radius. True or false? True. We don't need to make any changes to that one. The radius of the circle is 8 inches. False. What is the radius of the circle? 4 inches, because the diameter is 8. So the radius would have to be half of that, which is 4. So I'm changing that to 4 inches. The diameter of the circle is 8 inches. True or false? True. Your homework, folks. 5.3a homework section. One thing that I want to explain, please look at number 2. It says the decimal for pi is 3.1415926535889. That's okay. ... It says which fraction is closest. So keep in mind, I'm not saying that 1/4 is the same as 0.1415. I'm not saying that 1/5 is the same as 0.1415. I just want to know, of those fractions, which one is going to be the closest to this approximation. Okay, the rest are pretty self-explanatory. This one is kind of weird, so you need to figure out the decimal approximations of each of these, which one is closest to that 0.1415926. All right, that is it. Make sure you get that 5.3a homework complete, and we'll see you next time.